and I work with the Sierra Fund. We are a nonprofit organization based in Nevada City, whose mission is to restore ecosystem and community resiliency in the Sierra Nevada. We are hosting the presentation this evening. Welcome. This presentation actually happened a couple of weeks ago. I forgot to hit the record button when we started, and so I'm just doing this brief intro to let people know what this is about. The presentation is about fire preparedness, and we'll hopefully touch on some of the unique considerations for people who own and live in manufactured homes. So I would like to introduce the panelists. We have Paul Cummings and Jen Tamo from the Nevada County Office of Emergency Services. Paul is a program manager at OES, and Jen Tamo is an administrative analyst there. Joining us from Nevada County Consolidated Fire District is Marshal Terry McMahon. And from the Nevada County Sheriff's Department, we have Brandon Corchero. Brian Snyder joins us from Freed Center for Independent Living, and we are also joined by representatives from some of the mobile home parks in Grass Valley. I'd want to welcome Kristen McFall, Nancy Picker, and Alex Ursut. The presentations will be shared between, or at least the first one will be shared between OES and Nevada County Sheriff's Office. Then Terry McMahon will make some comments, then Brian Snyder from Freed will speak, and then I'll conclude. The presentations together should be 35 to 40 minutes long, and after that, the meeting will open up to panelists and others who'd like to ask a question or make a comment. And I'll explain how that's done when we get to the Q&A. So let's get started, and I'd like to introduce Paul Cummings. Paul is Program Manager at Nevada County OES.
Next slide, please. So at this point, we're gonna play a quick 2-minute video that shows a family, and if you go ahead and start it off, Jen, it shows a family evacuating from Paradise. And it's a tough video to watch, but I think it really helps to illustrate the challenges that we face in Nevada County with evacuation and with wildfire.
That sucks. People don't lose their houses.
And again, for those of you who can't see the video, it's a family driving in a car. It's very dark. There's smoke everywhere. There's fire on all sides of the road. And it looks like they're literally driving through a tunnel of fire.
Heavenly Father, please help us. Please help us to be safe. I'm thankful for Jeremy and his willingness to be brave.
So I think what this illustrates, like we said, evacuating during a wildfire is a real challenge. And so it illustrates the message too that you need to get out early. And I know Sergeant Corchero will foot stomp that during his presentation as well. I also want to point out during that video that it looked like it was nighttime, but it was the middle of the day. So that's why we say practice 3 ways out of your neighborhood to get to a main evacuation route, day or night, because you never know during the day when you have a fire that's got smoke everywhere, it can become very disorienting. So practice, practice, practice 3 ways out of your neighborhood. Next slide, please. So this is our OES team, myself, Jen Tamo, and Lieutenant Bob Jacobs represent your OES team, along with, we've got some seasonal defensible space inspectors. And we make up the team of folks that are working to mitigate threats in our county, natural disaster threats, mainly wildfire. And we're also going to be very involved during the response element of a wildfire, whether that be through coordinating evacuations or coordinating the county response through our Emergency Operations Center. Next slide, please. So these 5 graphics represent the main goals and mission of OES this year in 2020 that we really wanted to focus on. So working from left to right, the first graphic is a vehicle traveling down a very narrow dirt road with vegetation all around. And that picture is in Nevada County. And we know that there are many places like that. So our first goal is to create safer evacuation routes countywide to save lives. Our next graphic with all the little pictures and phones and envelopes is representative of our effort to improve early warning systems and emergency communications to reach everyone. It's important that the message gets out early that there is a threat in your area, whether it be a flood or a wildfire. And that's one of the things that our office helps to coordinate through things like Code Red or the Sheriff's Department through their high-low siren. You'll hear more about those two tools later on. The middle graphic represents the defensible space. I think many of you have seen this before. If you haven't seen it, if you can't see it here, you should have gotten your Ready, Set, Go handbook in the mail, and I'm holding that up for those of you who can see it. Every resident in the county should have received one of those, and in there, everything that we're going to cover tonight is also found in that handbook. But one of our missions is to encourage residents to establish defensible space around their homes and their neighborhoods by reducing hazardous vegetation and encouraging voluntary compliance with our defensible space standards. The next graphic just represents our coordinated approach to planning and community outreach. We also do fundraising activities like requesting grants and maintaining grants. And we do things like you're seeing tonight, educating the public on things that they can do, that you can do to be more prepared. And then lastly, that last graphic represents some of the work that we're trying to do to bolster our critical infrastructure in Nevada County through things like we have long-standing plans to try to get more robust communication systems, water storage systems, water delivery systems, green waste facilities, and bolster our evacuation routes. Next slide, please. So for those of you who can't see this slide, it's a map of Western Nevada County, and it's just showing the absolute spider web of roads that we have from county to private roads. And it really represents the challenge twofold of a coordinated evacuation for a large-scale wildfire, and then also for the roadside hazardous vegetation reduction, which is what we need to do, remove the brush along the sides of our roadways to make evacuation safer. So we have over 560 miles of county maintained roads in Nevada County. Our Public Works Office does work to brush those roads and remove the vegetation along the sides. They are on an 11-year cycle, but they've really been trying to keep ahead of that with some grants. They've gotten a grant from CAL FIRE to expedite that process. So right now they're doing about 70 miles a year of roadside clearing. And the rest of it is private roads, 1,500 miles of private roads. If you think about the length of the United States from West Coast to East Coast is 3,000 miles, 1,500 miles of that of private roads in Nevada County. So that's our responsibility, right, as residents. That's where we come in to reduce that roadside vegetation and make evacuation safer. Next slide, please. I'll quickly touch on an umbrella term that we use, hazardous vegetation reduction program. I talked about in that first slide the threat posed to Nevada County by hazardous vegetation, by the health of our forests. And so we are working together through a few different programs to try to reduce that vegetation and reduce that threat at a large scale. So on the left side, we've got our defensible space inspectors that do work in OES, and they go out to educate the public around the county defensible space ordinance 2477, and they do also enforce that ordinance. The next graphic shows some folks throwing, some sticks into a dumpster, and that represents our green waste program that Ms. Gentamo was very involved in coordinating, and this year was an incredible success. So if any of you went out and volunteered to help out at one of our green waste sites that we had over the last month and a half, I thank you. If you went out and cleaned up your property or helped others clean up their property and helped get rid of some waste and take it here, I thank you. This was a great program that we are gonna have again next year. And I wanna thank the Fire Safe Council and the Northern Sierra Air Quality Management District for their contributions to this year's Green Waste program. The next graphic is of the Ponderosa project. And if you haven't heard of that, it's a landscape level shaded fuel break that is essentially creating a park-like environment in what was a very thick wooded area. So it's not a complete fire break where they're just clear cutting everything, but they're doing some heavy thinning to allow our firefighters a place to make a stand against a large-scale wildfire that would threaten Grass Valley. So that's something that our office has partnered with the Fire Safe Council and Callaway-S on. And then the last picture represents some of the roadside clearing that our county does along county maintained roads. Next slide, please. So this slide is representative. There's a lot of graphics on here of things you can do to maintain situational awareness. We're going to start to tell that story of what you need to do to stay informed and to be ready for a wildfire all year long, but also during those heightened times of threat, which are red flag days. So we want you to make sure you're staying tuned in to trusted news sources. You can again find those in our Ready, Set, Go handbook, but those are going to be radio stations like KNCO or KVMR. The Union and UBNet are great sources. You can tune in to the National Weather Service to make sure you're getting the red flag warnings. You can follow OES and UBNet on Facebook and Twitter. You can get information on Nextdoor. We recommend you get a radio, and especially a hand crank radio or solar powered radio that will then be off the grid so that you can get information about current conditions. And we've got a picture of a phone off the hook here, just representing the potential challenges that some of you may have with a landline. And it makes sense to have redundant systems. So have a landline and a cell phone to make sure that you stay informed. Next slide, please. So we've got a graphic up now talking about the conditions that would constitute a red flag. And again, a red flag means that there is a heightened fire danger because of the conditions. And this is when PG&E is going to turn the power off. So kind of a double concern there. So the conditions quickly are going to be strong winds, high temperatures, low humidity levels, dry fuels, and an ignition source. Next slide, please. So we've got a slide up for personal preparedness, and there's a picture of a bunch of different, what looks like camping supplies. And the message here is that you can do some things at your level to make sure you're ready to go in a moment's notice. So I won't go into what should be in a go bag, but you can go to our website, readynevadacounty.org, and you can learn about what should go in a go bag. You can also look in your Ready, Set, Go handbook to get more information, but we recommend that you pack a go bag and that you also pack any other essential items that you may need that you don't want to leave home without, like important paperwork, and you have those things ready on a red flag day. Next slide, please. So continuing the conversation around things that you can do to be personally prepared, we've got a bunch of different graphics up here. The first one is public safety power shut off. So PG&E is going to turn the power off because there's a fire threat, and they're worried about their infrastructure potentially causing a fire on high winds and low humidity days. So again, we're already behind the curve if PG&E is turning the power off. So increase your readiness level on those days. Have a full tank of gas. During an evacuation is not the time to fill up. If the power's off, know how to open your garage door manually if you have one. We recommend you park your vehicle, you back it into your driveway so that you can jump in and go. You don't have to mess around with backing up. We've got a picture of a backpack there to make sure that you've got your go bag ready. We have a picture of a cat and a cat carrier to emphasize that, you know, pets are family too, and we don't want to leave home without them. So make sure you're planning for that, that you've got set aside some food and medications and the pet carrier should you need that, and you need to leave in a moment's notice. We have a graphic here for Find Your Five, and this will come up again during Sergeant Corchero's presentation. But we just want to emphasize this plan. If you haven't heard of it, it's an initiative to create a network of emergency allies. And these are people that you can rely on during an emergency and that can rely on you to pass information, have shared accountability, and that you can share your plan with on a red flag day. So if Greg was one of the folks that was in my, my group of 5, and it was a red flag day, I would send him a text message or an email and say, hey, Greg, not sure if you knew, but today's a red flag day. So my plan is I've got my car gassed up, I've got my go bag ready, and if there's a fire in my neighborhood, I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna go to the Kmart parking lot. That's how specific you should be, and you should share that message across with everyone else. And if there's a code red, or if you hear of a wildfire in an area, you need to be texting or calling your 5 to make sure that they know about it, because it's what it is. It's essentially another safety net to pass information so that we're not all dependent on code red or the phone or the news. And then we have some things to not do. We don't want you to be dragging chains on red flag days that could cause sparks and cause fires, running equipment like chainsaws or lawnmowers, and having burn piles. There should be no more burn piles this year. Those stopped June 15th. Next slide, please. At this point, I'll turn it over to Sergeant Corchero, and he's going to reemphasize those points we already made around knowing 3 ways out, having a rally point, and find your 5.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Ben Corchero with the Sheriff's Office. I'm the Community Outreach Sergeant here at the Sheriff's Office and stepping in for Lieutenant Jacobs tonight. I just want to go over a couple things on this first slide. It's talking about evacuation readiness. And really what we mean by that is to have a plan and to practice your plan when it comes to evacuations. We talk about evacuating early and evacuating often. What I mean by evacuating early is obviously when a notification is sent out to you guys to make sure you're ready to evacuate. And really what I mean by evacuating often is to have a plan and actually practice your plan. One of the things that I want to talk about is your 3 ways out of your house in an evacuation. And we want you to have multiple ways out of your house because we don't know exactly when a fire is going to take place or how it's going to affect your residence. So having multiple ways to get out of your house and to actually practice those routes and drive those routes on a fairly regular basis. And by doing that, you can even look at your daily trips to town and how you go to town and actually practicing the different routes so you know them. And not only practicing during the daytime, but also practicing at night. Because in the Paradise Fire, in the middle of daytime, it was pitch black outside. So if you practice at night, you'll have that awareness of where you are to help you get out safely. We also have an evacuation meeting place. And what we mean by that is during a major fire, oftentimes the cell phone services go out, your phone lines go out, and you don't have a way to get a hold of your family, your loved ones, or your friends. So having predestined evacuation meeting places, 3 or 4 of them, that you can talk with your family and your loved ones ahead of time, or if you do have the time to get on the phone prior to your evacuation, letting them know exactly where you're going. But if you have those locations already thought out with your family, you can hopefully just meet your family there. We want you to have a couple of them because, again, we don't know where the fire is going, and maybe one of those places might be in a general area where the fire is headed. So to make sure you guys have that. To talk a little bit more about Find Your 5 plan, pulling over it pretty well, I just want to emphasize it really goes into pre-planning. And if you know and you go over this pamphlet and you figure out who your people are that you want to contact and make aware if you need to evacuate. Also, it's nice to have places you can go that maybe aren't within Nevada County, maybe having one location to where if you're evacuated, you don't end up in a shelter locally because obviously that's not the ideal place for everyone to go. So maybe having someone who lives out of the area where you can go to their place during an evacuation, a couple folks within Nevada County may be closer that you could go to if the fire is not in that general area. Next slide, please. The next thing I want to talk about, if you can't see this slide, is the new evacuation tags that OES and the Sheriff's Office have come up with for the public to utilize. It's basically a Tyvek placard, you could call it, with some little zip tie wiry things on the end of them. And what you can do is you can place those during an evacuation at the end of your driveway. The nice thing about these is during an evacuation, the Sheriff's Office and other public safety members will be trained to go door to door and going through neighborhoods. Unfortunately, in Nevada County, we live in a very rural area. Some of our driveways are very long. So if we see these tags at the end of your driveway, if you've already evacuated, it tells us as a sheriff's office that we don't need to go up that particular driveway and knock on that door. For a lot of the mobile homes, one of the best places you can put those tags if you evacuate is right on your doorknob, or if you have a little garage on the front of your mobile home, you can put it on the garage. That way it ensures that you've evacuated, and it tells law enforcement and public safety you have as well. The other thing with these tags is our law enforcement officers have them in their patrol cars. So during evacuations, if we evacuate a house, we will also hang a tag. Next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about evacuations themselves and the warnings that we are going to be issuing. One of the things that we can't stress enough is to evacuate early. Oftentimes, we have people that want to fend off their house with a garden hose and try and knock down the fire, or they want to stay on their ground and they don't want to leave. Unfortunately, all that's doing is putting themselves, their families, and really everybody else in jeopardy. The sooner you can evacuate when an order is issued, hopefully the less traffic congestion there will be. The longer you wait, the more traffic there's going to be. It's going to be harder to get everybody out of the area safely. A couple of the different things that we may issue is a shelter-in-place order, which more or less goes along the lines of a law enforcement activity, an evacuation warning, which is warning you of a potential fire or emergency in your area, and then an immediate evacuation order. If you get an immediate evacuation order, it's recommended that you evacuate immediately. A couple of different ways that these orders will go out is we have our code red system, which we'll talk about in a minute. Law enforcement will also be driving through the area with their PA, our new high-low siren that we've installed in our patrol cars, which you'll be able to hear in a minute. And also, periodically, we'll be going door to door to evacuate. Next slide, please. To talk a little bit about the Code Red emergency alerts. Basically, this is a program that you can sign up through readynevadacounty.org, as well as 211. What it's going to do is it registers your phone or your email. So if there's an emergency in your neighborhood, we will send out an alert and try and identify you as best we can of what that emergency is and how you guys need, as a public, need to react to that emergency. Next slide, please. We're going to try and play a video here, so hopefully it works for us. And this is going to be a video of our high-low siren that has been placed in not only the Nevada County Sheriff's cars, as well as Grass Valley, Nevada
Even though it just rained, it's important to remember we're still in the middle of fire season. Keeping this in mind, your local police chiefs and I would like to introduce you to a new sound we will be using to notify you and your family of an immediate evacuation order. This new high-low system will not replace our Code Red notifications. It is simply another way in which we can notify you and your family of an emergency in your area. Situational awareness means using all of your senses during an emergency.
Eyes, nose, and ears.
The high-low siren is a new sound to help you stay safe in an emergency.
It is specifically designed to alert you to an immediate evacuation order.
If you hear this sound, it means only one thing: evacuate immediately. You will only hear this sound during an evacuation order.
If time permits, officers and deputies will be responding to your area and using PAs and going door to door to do evacuations. But if you hear this sound, you can help them in doing their job safely and evacuate the area immediately.
If you missed the announcement or have questions, please do not call 911. Immediately institute your family's evacuation plan. Contact 211 if you have questions, or go to a trusted media source once you are safely evacuated.
Remember, 911 is only for emergencies.
The Nevada County Sheriff's Office, Grass Valley Police Department, and Nevada City Police Department have all installed these sirens in their patrol vehicles. So if you hear this siren, it means one thing and one thing only: evacuate, and evacuate immediately.
Nevada County is now part of a special pilot program instituted by Napa County to be better prepared for evacuations. State, regional, and local officials who made this happen now welcome you, our community members, to the team.
Your job, know the sound and know what it means.
Evacuate.
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 Okay, and I think Sergeant Corchero might be having some trouble with his video right now. He just messaged me that he's frozen, so I'm going to pick up where he left off. We do want to quickly go through the evacuation decision matrix, so just so that the public understands how this all might come together. So somebody sees smoke, they're going to call 911. You know, and I think we've got Nancy Picker on here who could probably speak to this better than I could, but you know, they're going to establish a unified command between fire and law. They will assess the situation and they'll determine, okay, are homes and properties and people threatened by this wildfire, right? Where's it going? How quickly have we got it contained? And they do that. They can do that size up pretty quickly when they first get out there. So after that initial size up or that initial assessment, they will determine if an evacuation is warranted. If it's not, then they'll continue fighting the fire. If it becomes warranted later on, then they will activate those tools that we have. First thing would likely be code red. Some of the things they might consider are going to be the conditions of the fire's behavior, some of the fuel, the topography, and the weather are all things that may drive a wildfire and drive their decision making. Next slide, please. So what you might expect if you've signed up for Code Red, and you may even hear over the loudspeakers, this is the Nevada County Sheriff's Office. Evacuations are being ordered for this area due to the Lobo fire. Please leave immediately. They may also give you a direction of the fire and the direction that the fire is burning, so that way you can take that in as you make your decision about which of the 3 ways that you've practiced you want to use to get out of your neighborhood. At this point, though, during your evacuation, I will say, we really want you to be a good follower and be very responsive to law enforcement and to the situation, right? A question that we oftentimes get is, how do I get out of my neighborhood? Well, we can't really give you that specific answer because, as Chief Matthias from CAL FIRE would say, it depends. It's going to depend on the circumstances. So listen to law enforcement, look for law enforcement, follow their directions, but in the absence of law enforcement, if they haven't gotten there yet, to provide you directions on which way to go, use your best judgment and get out as early as possible. Next slide, please. So lastly, we want to leave you with, you know, your role as a community and as citizens. We want you to do your part to make sure you're reducing hazards around your home, that you're preparing yourself and your neighbors, that you're maintaining your own level of readiness, especially on red flag days, and that during the response and the recovery phase, if you haven't been affected, think about ways that you can support your neighbors, maybe the next town over here in Nevada County, after or during an event. So with that, Greg, I will pass it back to you. I'm not sure if we're going to take questions now or if we'll have Brian and Terry go.
Let's wait on questions. Let's go through all the presentations and then we'll just have everyone have the opportunity to ask questions then.
Sounds great.
Go ahead, Terry. Do you want to make some comments?
Okay, I'm Terry McMahon with Nevada County Consolidated Fire District, and I thought I'd go over some of the specifics. Paul and the sergeant went over a lot of the information on evacuation, but I thought I was looking at some of the questions that came in and thought I'd give you a little information on how mobile home parks work and how they kind of fit into the fire service. So they're really under the jurisdiction of the community housing development. So for us, it's hard to go in and enforce a lot of things inside the park without the help of HCD. The district only has some jurisdiction in some of the buildings that are like the clubhouses and buildings where people congregate. So that makes it a little difficult. And as you know, mobile homes are typically, the yards are smaller, they're buildings that are closer together. And in some of the older parks, the 1960s and 70s parks, there's not always a lot of fire hydrants. And as new parks develop or as they expand, HCD does give us a little bit of leverage to at least make some comments on things like evacuation areas and roadways in and out, and actually fire flow. So those are kind of some important things to know about. And like I said, with buildings that are closer together, even in neighborhoods, wind-driven fires, those buildings are going to tend to move the fire a little faster. So, evacuation out of the parks are pretty vital. I do want to really emphasize the Find Your Five. A lot of the mobile home parks have our older population. Some of them need help getting out. So it's really important to develop a relationship with your neighbors so that you can help each other out. That is extremely important. And if you know that there's people that can't get out, we need to know about that early on. So in the fire. So really, like I said, evacuations, the park owners and some of the park staff should be putting together some evacuation plans for the parks. That's one of their responsibilities. I often get asked about, the fire hydrant systems. That's also their responsibility to maintain those systems in operating condition. And they also have to have somebody certified to test those hydrants every 5 years and report to HCD. So really, I know your board of supervisors are very involved in wildfire evacuation or wildfire planning. And so I just thank you for the opportunity here to speak tonight.
Thank you, Marshal McMahon. And Brian, take it away.
Hello, I'm Brian Snyder. I'm Freed's Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. For those of you that don't know, Freed is an aging and disability resource center. And currently, right now, we are working with PG&E and California Foundation for Independent Living Centers to assist with access and functional needs of older adults and people with disabilities. And right now, we are offering, for those that have life-sustaining medical equipment, we have resources such as the Yeti 3000 battery, which can power devices such as CPAP machines, BiPAP machines, nebulizers, oxygen concentrators, hospital beds, and so forth. And so we have those resources. We also have resources for if the power exceeds the Yeti's capacity, we offer hotel stays and food and also gas for generators. So those are some of the resources that we have. As far as what I can do to, or what we can do to assist is also is an emergency preparedness planning specifically for older adults and people with disabilities. So every Monday this month, actually next Monday, starting at 12:30, we will have a emergency preparedness, personal preparedness webinar specifically for older adults and people with disabilities. And it basically covers everything that's covered here, plus anything related to access and functional needs. So please, if you have any questions or concerns, or you want to create an emergency preparedness plan, please do contact Freed. You can contact me. Phone number is 530-477-3333. That's 530-477-3333. And I'd like to say something with regards to Find Your Five. I often talk with consumers that, a lot of older adults, people with disabilities are often isolated, and they don't have five people. So I just want to acknowledge that and know that Freed is aware of that, and we know you're out there, and we want to acknowledge you, and you're not alone, and we're working to help you find your five. So if you want to contact us, we can work on an emergency preparedness plan and we're here to serve you. So thank you, Greg, for inviting Freed, and thank you, Paul, for the audio description as well. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian, for coming, and
Pleasure to be here.
really glad to have everybody here. So you've just heard about what can be done as families and neighbors to be ready for wildfire, and I hope that the presentations were useful and a refresher for everyone, and included some new information about how to prepare and what to do in case of an emergency. Preparation and planning is necessary because we know that that fire is a possibility in our area. And we're fortunate in Nevada County to have public service agencies that are working diligently on our behalf, and in case of an emergency, have the resources and a well-developed plans to assist us. But we also need to take a broader look at the reasons why wildfires are becoming more frequent and more severe, and to move quickly and wisely on initiatives to lessen the conditions that contribute to catastrophic wildfires. I'm going to share a screen picture. Everybody see that? I can't see my Zoom screen right now, so. Can everybody see the picture? It is a photograph taken in 1890 of a Feather River. For those of you on the phone, you would see a very large river valley with trees that are populated fairly thinly on the mountainside. I'm going to now switch to a photograph of from the same view of the Feather River in 1993. And as you can see, the forests are much denser than they were 100 years ago. And it is people estimate that the tree density 100 years ago ranged from 40 to 60 trees per acre. Forests now are way too dense, and they represent a significant factor today contributing to larger and hotter fires. And these fires are much harder to stop. And as good as our firefighting forces are, there's a limit to what they can do given the current state of our forests. And this overgrown condition is also affecting forests' ability to serve other ecosystem functions like water storage and a number of others, which I won't go into right now. One proposal that's being discussed is to try to return forests to be more like what they were before in terms of tree density. And managing forests and their understory is already underway in many areas, but its pace and scale need to expand. And to do this, we need to increase fuel reduction efforts, which would be hand and mechanical tree thinning, brushing and masticating the forest floors to help reduce the fuel loads that exist currently and that are, making our forests particularly vulnerable to fires. Another thing that needs to happen is forest restoration. National forests located in the Sierras are ramping up efforts to systematically assess, plan, and implement large-scale projects to restore forests to something closer to historical growth patterns. And so are water agencies like NID, the Yuba Water Agency, and the Placer County Water Agency, who manage the watersheds in this region. Of course, funding is a primary barrier, but state and federal agencies, private funders, local agencies, and nonprofits are working to direct funds to these projects. The other thing that's happening, needs to happen more, is developing collaborative partnerships. The Sierra Nevada is a quilt work of land ownership. We have national forests, state properties, local municipalities, private timberlands, BLM, individual small landowners, and tracts of land that are held in conservation easements, and they all share the landscape. And this makes implementing landscape scale treatments across ownership boundaries more complex. But these entities are beginning to forge alliances to make this possible. And the Yuba Forest Network is an exciting example of this in our area. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but just know that it's happening. And if you want to look it up, try the Yuba Forest Network. If we want to better manage forests and advanced forest health into the future, how is this going to happen? And some of the things that I want to point out or mention right now is one of the things we need to do is we need to develop business models that make smart, sustainable use of our forest resources. And this includes logging, but within a forest management frameworks that are environmentally sound and economically viable. For example, the Camptonville Community Partnership Biomass Facility is close to coming to obtaining their permits to build a biomass facility that will utilize slash from the local forests surrounding their area to generate electricity, as well as creating infrastructure with the reliable heat and power sources that they hope will attract other industries to the area. It's a really brilliant idea. It looks like it's going to happen, and it's a pretty interesting model and prototype for possible ways to make forest thinning into a financial model that will work and pay for itself. Like I said, we do need to create financial mechanisms to make this work happen. Blue Forest is an interesting example of a funding model, a novel funding model that allows private investors to help they invest in forest restoration projects, and it helps kickstart larger initiatives. Look them up, Blue Forest. One last thing I want to mention is just the constructive use of fire. There's a lot of talk about how fire is a very natural part of our landscape. We live in a fire adapted area. The Tahoe National Forest is beginning to embrace fire as a tool to manage their forests. It's the most economical way to treat large tracts of lands, and it provides many environmental benefits that are becoming better understood and appreciated by the public, and as well as by agencies around the state. So just mention a few of the things that need to happen in order to make forest health and forest management happen in our area. So questions on how can we support these efforts? And the first step is to acknowledge that this work needs to happen and to take interest in it and to speak up for it. If improved forest management is needed, we'll need to advocate for it. The second thing is just to develop your own gaze. It's good to look around and think what's happening in your immediate area. I'm starting to look at the local landscape differently with an eye to fire resiliency. I'm asking questions like, who owns that parcel? What's being done, if anything? And what needs to be done to make it more fire resilient? It's a very interesting process. And we need to take individual initiative. Landowners, large and small, are thinking how to do this work on their own parcels. We happen to have one of the most vibrant Firewise community neighborhood organizations in the nation. It's a kind of patchwork approach, but as more individuals join and understand the importance of home hardening and defensive space and join this effort, more and more parcels are being improved, hardened, and it collectively improves the chances that our homes will survive a wildfire. And lastly, I just want to mention, just recognize where we live. We live in a forest, and it's in our immediate best interest to support large-scale landscape treatments in the lands that surround us. It's going to require coordinated efforts, and it's going to take resources. And each of us need to advocate for these healthy forests. And there are multiple reasons to do this: to improve the capacity of our watersheds to provide water, to foster carbon sequestration, to improve air quality, and to, of course, to minimize the chance of wildfires. So if you're ever interested in talking about forest health and fire, please reach out to me. My name is Greg Thrush, and my email is on the flyer that I sent out for this event. It's gregthrush@sierrafund.org. So now I want to invite our panelists and others to ask questions and to weigh in on anything we've talked about this evening. And the way remote participation works, this isn't the case for the panelists, but everybody else who's on the phone and on Zoom, is that anyone who wants to speak or ask a question, make a comment, may do so by raising their hand. And you can do this by pressing *9 on your phone keypad, or activating the hand icon using Zoom on your computer or mobile device. If you're using Zoom to raise your hand, press on the participants icon, and then you'll see a side panel that has probably just yourself and maybe other participants. At the black bar at the bottom, you should see a little 5-fingered icon at the bottom right-hand corner, and that, if you press that, that will raise your hand. Jen will be watching out to see who wants to talk, and she'll let you speak in probably the order that you request. So, okay, let's, do any of the park representatives on the panel want to make any comments or ask any questions before we turn it over to the our general audience?
Greg, I'd like to make one clarification.
Sure.
This is Brian from Freed. I just wanted to let the public know that the items that I mentioned for specifically for life-sustaining medical equipment or any access and functional needs, those were specifically related to public safety power shutoff. So the Yeti battery, hotel stays, food cards, gas cards, that's all related to public safety power shutoffs. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. So, anybody have any things to ask of us? Kirsten, go ahead.
Thank you, Greg. I am from Olympic Glade Mobile Home Estates, represent that mobile home park, and on behalf of our community, I'd like to very much thank everyone who has put this together and the information that's been presented here tonight. About 9 months ago, our mobile home park faced a bit of a crisis in the Dorsey fire, which was at our back door. And fortunately, we were only under an evacuation warning. We did not have to evacuate. Yet it set a precedent for how prepared are we in our park. And as an outcome of that event, our HOA started a safety committee, which fortunately we were able to heavily promote and develop, because only 3 months before we had instituted a website particularly for HOA, olympiagladehoa.com. Our safety page now is full of information that helps our residents, which we often duplicate in our newsletter for those who do not have access to the internet. We now have 25 safety concerns we are promoting and tackling on our webpage. And although they cover the gamut from inside our park to outside the park, when we asked our residents what they're the most concerned about, what to present here tonight to the experts that are involved, a big theme popped up. And that is what's happening outside of our park, directly outside of our park. We have many residents who live on the perimeter, whose properties back up to lots that are unkept, uncared for, whether they are abandoned properties, strips of properties coming into our park, around our park, and at any moment's notice, those could go up in flames, threatening our homes, our residents here. And they are concerned, they're very concerned. We now have a very supportive management. We are tackling a lot of the internal components of being prepared for evacuation, fire safety, many of the concerns and informational topics that were brought up tonight. But again, it's right outside our park. We have attempted to find out who owns these strips and pieces of property, only to be met time and time again with, it's not my problem, I'm not going to take care of it, or just avoiding what needs to be done and cleaning up the property, even just once a year. As an example, we have a hillside that is on the opposite side of an entire drive here within our park that remains unkept. And not too long ago, homeless people were camping in there, and it was very much a concern in the summertime, going into fall, fire safety here. So our question is very specific. Now, let me back up a bit. We have competent people here within our park, in our HOA, who can research, go and find those maps and find out who actually owns those properties. What do we do? Where do we turn when, after we contact them and ask them, will you please clean up your property so that we here are safe? They ignore us. It's not my problem. Who do we turn to? Who can take care of that for us?
Terry,
This is Terry. So your park is within the city limits of Grass Valley. And so my first recommendation is that you contact the Grass Valley Fire Department and talk to them. And talk to some of your city leaders and get their backing. I know in our fire district, we take it very seriously. We've graciously go out and look at parcels. We're happy to do that in our fire district, and the Grass Valley Fire Department's the same way. They will come out and look, or they should come out and look and see what they can do. We're finding, we did get a little bit of grant money to send letters out to all our vacant parcel owners within our fire district that just asked them to simply look at their property and maybe do some fuels management, a fire break or anything. And if they had questions, to call us. We even offered for those out of town property owners a drone flight. We have a drone, we fly over the property, and my deputy fire marshal, Patrick Mason, we're a partner with Nevada County OES for doing the Defensible Space or inspection program. Patrick will go out and fly the drone and send that information to those property owners. And we're actually having some really good success on that. So I would start with the fire department.
So the fire department, and the fire department, the Grass Valley City Fire Department is where we can contact Patrick Mason. Is that correct?
No, you would want to contact Chief Mark Boutron. He's the fire chief, and he'll get you in contact with somebody that can come out and have a look at your situation.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that information.
Hi, Greg. This is Jen Tamo from the Office of Emergency Services, and we have a question that was sent in online, and we also have some folks who have questions that are on the call line. I'm going to take the chat question first. I'll let, I think Paul is ready to answer this. It says, how will we know where the evacuation centers will be? I understand the Kmart parking lot and the fairgrounds, but with all the people going to those two spots, if there's no room, where else would you go in Grass Valley?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so I use the example of Kmart because that's just part of my family's plan of where we're going to try to rally up, because it's a central location that will hopefully not be threatened by fire. But so for your family plan, I recommend that you have multiple locations that are going to be, probably surrounded by concrete, like the example of Kmart, that you can use as a rally point. But I think, like Sergeant Corchero said, if that one is threatened, you need to have a fallback. So I would recommend you have like one, 2, and 3. But as far as where you can always go, OES, we do plan, we do work with the Red Cross and other agencies to plan for sheltering and evacuation centers. But to be honest, we don't really put out all of those locations because a lot of them are volunteer based. They're things like churches and schools. And so what we don't want is during an event that once you evacuate, you go immediately to the school, to the church, because we stand those up based on the proximity of the threat. And so what we would recommend is that during the time that you're evacuating, just get away to a safe place and then start to tune into these trusted news sources that we talked about, whether that be Facebook, Twitter, the Union, Ubinet, the radio, and start listening for and reading to find out where we are directing people. And it may be as clear as there may be a deputy at an intersection, that's saying, hey, go here, this is the place that's been set up. That's going to really depend on the situation as it's unfolding.
All right, Greg, I have allowed Carrie to ask a question. She had her hand raised. This is Carrie McTee from Grass Valley, if you're interested in hopping on and asking a question.
Yes, this is Carrie. And I am not familiar with Brian Snyder's organization. I'm from Forest Springs, and we have a mobile home community. We have a lot of elderly here. What are the initials you're saying? You're saying Freed, and how do you spell that?
Yes, it's F is in Foxtrot, R is in Romeo, E is in Echo, E is in Echo, and D is in Delta. And it's Freed Center for Independent Living, and we're an aging and disability resource center. So we have resources from everything from helping people with independent living, which basically can be anything from signing up for Social Security, for housing. We have assistive technology, a lending library, anything from shower benches to commodes to vision magnifying, anything. And we also have a fix-it program for, you know, putting in wheelchair ramps and so on. We have a variety of services, and what I'm working on is emergency preparedness. So anything related to personal preparedness and emergency preparedness, we're here to assist, especially with the public safety power shutoffs.
And you have a website?
Yes, it's just freed.org. And on that website, if you're interested, you can sign up for our webinar for emergency preparedness, which is every Monday at 12:30 p.m.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about Connecting Point and this network of kind of a service hub that you are involved, that Freed is involved in?
Yeah, we work with 211 Connecting Point, and I highly recommend anybody that has a question about anything related to emergency preparedness or just finding general services within the county, or if you have questions about anything, call 211 and they can assist you anything from housing to emergency preparedness to anything from in-home support services. Anything you need to know about anything, call 211 Connecting Point. And we work with them during public safety power shutoffs to assess people's needs. And so we're happy to promote them, and please do call them if you have any questions, and they'll send you to any services within the county that you may need.
Thanks.
Thank you, Greg.
Looks like we have a couple more questions. I'm going to open the line for Michael D. And Carol, I see that you also have a question. You'll be on deck. Michael D., you should have the opportunity to unmute yourself now.
Yeah, hi, my name's Michael, and I live at Olympia Glade, where Kirsten lives. And one of the questions that I wrote out in a question, you know, kind of to pass it on, I thought they would be, you know, asked to you directly, is the concern about the Dorsey Drive Marketplace adventure that the city of Grass Valley is moving forward on. That is a very narrow area for a lot of people in this mobile home park, as well as the surrounding area, to get out of. If they're going to be doing any kind of construction or anything like that, and a fire rises up as a result of what they're doing or something else, we're very concerned about being able to get out. Who gets priority? Is the city of Grass Valley going to be responsible for not getting us out safely? And what are the consequences in the long run if some people should, unfortunately, not make it? That's what we're concerned about. This Dorsey Marketplace was not the thing to endorse at this point in time. And we're very concerned about the city council not hearing the people who are elderly and who have mobility issues, etc. Thank you. Did you guys hear me?
Yeah.
We did.
Oh, okay.
This is Terry from Consolidated Fire. And once again, I can't speak on behalf of the city of Grass Valley. However, part of my job in Consolidated's fire district is looking at plans for new construction or new developments, such as subdivisions, new commercial buildings. And, you know, I know a lot of road studies go in to a lot of that work. And, you know, the public hearings they have for the public to come in and comment, you know, is very important. So, you know, I would maybe get a hold of somebody on the planning commission, maybe the planner for the city of Grass Valley and ask some of those questions. And they might be able to tell you about how they came up with their traffic studies and some of their plans. That's where I'd start.
May I speak to that as well, Greg?
Yeah, please.
Is it Michael? Are you on the line there? I'm not sure who that was. I think it was Michael. Anyway, anything related to advocacy for older adults and people with disabilities, and this is an issue that sounds like something that could be advocated for, please do contact Freed, specifically contact Carl Sigmund. He's our new disability community advocate, and he would be happy to assist in assessing a situation and advocating for the needs of older adults and people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Right. Greg, I'm going to open it up for Carol to speak. She or he has a question.
Terrific.
Carol, the line is open for you. Carol, are you there? While we're working to connect Carol, I do have another question. Someone wrote, I'm afraid our park isn't doing enough to make sure the 200 plus people here are prepared to evacuate. Most don't seem to have landlines and aren't really comfortable with cell phones. They communicate with us by paper flyers and tubes by the mailbox. Is there anyone that can help us with a communication plan? And they're referring to mobile home park.
Can I talk on that one? Here at Forest Springs Mobile Home Park, we've been very, very proactive. I moved here about 3 years ago with a 40-year career in fire and saw the need here. And there were some ladies that had started an emergency evacuation plan here in the park. And we just took it one step further with the resources that I had available to me. And with that, we have maintained communications with the park via email. And I know some senior adults don't have access to computers, but we also utilize the flyers. Our management just recently put in a phone system as well. So they will notify via landline or cell phone within the park of any evacuations or any emergencies within the park. The other thing that we've done is we've also put in place a buddy system. So we identified persons in the park that would need assistance to evacuate. And then we met those persons up with a buddy. So they have an assigned person that will go and assist in an evacuation, that person that may need assistance. We also were able to obtain stickers that they put in the window that show that they are disabled and would need that assistance to exit out of the park. So we do have a lot of communications within our park with the flyers, the phone communications, the buddy system. We're going to try and take the buddy system one step further this year within the next month or two and actually have check-in with the residents in the park that would need assistance, making sure that they do have go bags, making sure that they're okay, especially during this time of COVID and even more isolation associated with that.
And thanks, Nancy. One thing I would add too is just as far as the messaging at a basic level, because I think the question was just about how information is shared. I know that there's concerns around, and I mentioned it during my presentation, the redundancy of the telecommunication system. So Code Red is great, but it's not a silver bullet. So while we want you to have a landline and a cell phone and be signed up for Code Red, again, that's just one of the ways we want you to be notified. Like your buddy system, Nancy, you know, having that the group of 5 at least. And as Brian mentioned, sometimes that's not always possible. But one of the last safety nets that I would hope that would at least get you the message that something's happening in your area is those high-low sirens that will be descending upon your neighborhood. There will be a massive response if there is a big fire from all over. You're not going to just, if you live in Grass Valley, you're not going to just see Grass Valley PD. You'll likely see Nevada City Police Department. you'll see CHP, and you'll see the sheriff's department all out there trying to get folks out of their neighborhood, and especially a mobile home park that would require additional attention. And you would hear those high-low sirens telling you that it's time to evacuate.
Greg, I have a question. Oh, Kirsten, would you like to speak?
So I'd like to make a comment as a follow-up to Michael D's question and his concerns regarding what's going on with the Dorsey Marketplace. And Terry McMahon, thank you for your input and your response to his question. So the Dorsey Marketplace project is on the other side of Dorsey from our park, and two of our escape gates are right there on Dorsey. The other one is, and our main entrance, in fact, is a very narrow road, and I'll speak to that in just a moment. So our safety committee did go through the environmental impact report for the Dorsey Marketplace, and we wrote, and I have a copy here, a very detailed letter of concern to the city of Grass Valley, which to my knowledge, we never received a response to. It was addressed to the mayor. And we did have members attending the city council meetings with concerns. And we knew that we couldn't stop the development, but our concerns are the egress in case of any emergency. And Michael's point, of course, was how could we, what was the plan to get out? And something that we brought up in our letter to the city council is that we have many elderly people around us. We are ourselves a senior park, but we have senior apartments, assisted living facilities, and that one narrow road, Olympia Park Drive, that I mentioned, that goes into our park. To get there, we have to pass the Brunswick Assisted Living Facility. So my question is that in the case of the sirens go off, the high-low, we need to get out of here. Who is going to be helping those assisted living facilities? Because that is a big concern for us, because the emergency personnel, we hope, that will come to help them may in fact block our egress out of the park here, particularly the main entrance. And so therefore that Dorsey, those two gates on Dorsey Drive, which we will immediately open up, become our lifeline. So can anyone here speak to that? Yes, Terry.
So my understanding after the fire last year was that the assisted living and the convalescent homes, they were all getting together and working out some emergency evacuation plans, because there's a lot of things that go into those planning. You have to have ambulances, and so it takes some time. So they're going to concentrate on, of course, the more significant, the one that's closer to the fire, and they're going to start getting those people out. But I do know they've been working on some evacuation plans, and sometimes they may just send some fire equipment there to protect the structures and shelter in place, and keep those folks inside relatively safe. When it does come time to evacuate, though, it's going to be quite a job to move patients, especially some of the bedridden ones. So I know they're all working on those plans, and they had quite a few meetings with the city and the county and some of the other players, the ambulance companies and folks like that would be involved in. And I know some of the retirement type facilities have buses and have access to more buses. So I know they were working that into their plan.
Well,
and I'll just second that, Terry, that yes, I've been part of those meetings, and that is part of the calculus, that depending on the threat to the residents and the volume of residents that would have to be potentially relocated, the firefighters, as you said, may just choose to defend that structure that's more likely to survive a fire with their defense, instead of risking evacuating everybody. That's going to be a case-by-case basis. And I think that the staff and the residents just need to be ready to do either option. But I know that the staff, at least at some of the locations, have already developed plans to like shut off HVAC systems and be ready to shelter in place.
All that is great. Thank you so much. We want them safe. We also want to be able to get out ourselves. It sounds like we may want to contact those surrounding facilities and see what some of those plans are so that we can be prepared too if we all have to evacuate at the same time.
And Kirsten, what I'm willing to do is if you can send me an email with what you currently have for your evacuation plan, I'm willing to connect with the Grass Valley Police Chief, Alex Gamelgard, and talk about, at least help you begin that conversation around your concerns.
Okay, great. And what's your email address?
paul.cummings@co.nevada.ca.us. And I can post that in the chat as well.
Okay, and it's CUMMINGS?
Yep.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Sure.
That'd be great.
So I'm seeing we're approaching 7:45, and I see a couple of people with questions. There's one in the chat, and John Elwell has a question. I just want to recognize that it is getting late, and I'm sure some people would like to check off. But if people are willing to wait to answer a couple more questions, that would be wonderful. Is everyone all right with that? Thank you. Thanks.
All right, I will take the first question in the chat, and then John, you'll be next. This question is from Donna, and she says, how does the current pandemic complicate preparations for wildfire preparedness, if at all?
And I can start answering that, and then maybe Terry and Brandon can answer for the first responder and preparedness side of things. But it doesn't change too much as far as what you can do to be ready. But what it does change are some of the things that may happen during an evacuation. So we've been working closely with the Red Cross and also with Cal OES on what sheltering and evacuation might look like during a pandemic. So they're setting up a new concept they're calling temporary evacuation points, where they're going to have people go to then triage essentially and determine if those individuals can go to a friend's house, or can they go into a hotel, or then should they go into a congregate shelter setting. So that's one of the major concerns. Is one of the last things the Red Cross wants to do right now is to put people into a congregate shelter setting. So there are a lot of options to put people up in hotels, and like Brian mentioned, I think there's just a lot of other options out there. I think that we can try to leverage during an event. So I don't want that to discourage anybody from evacuating, because the most important thing you can do is get away from the fire. And then once you get to one of these temporary evacuation points, then there should be some folks there helping to find a safe place for you. But I think as far as first responder readiness, this question has come up before, so I'll start the conversation, and Terry and Brandon, please chime in. But I know that our first responders are only, they're taking every precaution to maintain the health of their staff. They have all the PPE that they need to do their jobs, and they've been getting that from our MOAC. And I think as far as some of the CAL FIRE camps and other things with our seasonal firefighters, there's been considerations made there as well to keep those groups COVID safe. But if you two gentlemen have anything to add, I'll turn it over to you.
So for the fire service, our staff, they basically live together for 48 hours at a time, or even longer. So some of the precautions that we've taken at Consolidated Fire is when there's a shift change, when the new crews are coming in, the others are going home, the crew going home disinfects the station, and then they all meet in the parking lot, and pretty much everybody leaves except two people, so they can either do a shift, we call it a shift passover, either they can sit in their vehicles and talk to each other and do the passover, or they simply just leave an email for the oncoming shift. When that shift comes in, they disinfect the station again, and then they live there for a couple of days. They make sure the apparatus is always wiped down. And we also do temperature checks. So when we were really ramped up, we were doing temperature checks at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And if there was any change in that, we would send those people home, get them tested. And fortunately, we came through it really well. I will say that Cal OES and Cal Fire have been working on how are we going to work the base camps. And we actually have some folks, we have an engine that is out in Nevada right now on a fire. We went with a Sacramento County strike team, which is 5 engines. And so we'll see how that goes and see how they actually set their camps up. But they're going to have to do a few things different. And I know they were working on that.
Brandon?
As far as the sheriff's office side of things go, we're also making our precautions, just like Terry said, with temperature checks. All of our guys have their own vehicles assigned to them now, so we're not transferring vehicles. As far as the evacuations go, in the event of a fire, I can say nothing is going to change for the public safety side of things, making sure we're out there getting the evacuations completed and making sure everybody's safe.
Wonderful. Just brought on John Elwell to ask his question, and it looks like that might be our final question for the evening.
Yes, this is regarding the Dorsey Marketplace again. Just for a little background, I'm a trained medic, spent 15 years doing it. I was trained by the U.S. Forest Service as a firefighter and search and rescue. They never mentioned our park in the planning for Dorsey Marketplace. I have done evacuations of senior centers. It's a cluster bleed. Okay, that's all there is to it. Between the fire department, the ambulances, and the bloody news crews, it was almost impossible to get in or out. So, no, it is probably not good. We need to get a better plan. We have a total of 3 possible exits from our mobile home park and Olympia Glade. 2 of them are on Dorsey, which they don't include for Dorsey Marketplace. They're both below the planning for Dorsey Marketplace. So, no, we have a problem, a real problem. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, John. It sounds like there really needs to be some conversation between the mobile home park and the City of Grass Valley, the planning department, and the city fire department to make sure that during an emergency that your park will have priority in terms of its exiting. And I think that it sounds urgent. So if there's any way that I can help you with that, please let me know. And with that, I'd like to wrap up this evening. I first off want to thank all the panelists who took their time to make this happen. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I also am very pleased that we had quite a few attendees tonight, and I hope this was useful. I hope that we are all of us on all the panelists are learning how to do community interactions remotely in this new age. And I think that it's actually quite an effective way of connecting people in ways that are pretty functional. I think this was very successful. I hope that we can do this again. And I really thank you all for participating, attendees and panelists. So with that, let's say goodnight and till the next time.